Welcome to episode 5 of the Dial-Driven Hockey Mentality Podcast. I'm Chris Palmer, a mental performance coach for hockey players. Jeff Lerg works with athletes at all levels. We're here today to talk about the crazy season, the tough season, the comparison game. It's a tough time of the year where people are trying to figure out where they're going to be next year. It even exists in college. It exists when you're in the A. It doesn't matter. You're always trying to figure out where you are. But the comparison game is the killer. And today we're going to talk about that because I don't think there's anything that I see that's more difficult this time of year than hearing that somebody's got a deal and you don't. And oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? Jeff, tell me anything.
Mostly on the youth athletic side, hockey in general, it's obviously a highly competitive sport. In the youth game, there's such a different developmental path for the teenage years where there's the early developers, mid-level, and then the late developers. And this time of year, the teams that are kind of being recruited and built nationally around, and especially in our area in Michigan, the cutthroat mentality from the pro game has kind of drifted down into the youth game. So you start to hear of someone being committed somewhere or a position being offered to you to return to your team or not, and that can play a mental twist how you perform the rest of the season.
It makes so much sense too because we talked before about how these are businesses and they have to get whatever advantage they have. They've worked out a system to try to make it the most fair. NHL works out a draft system, right? We all know that the guys get drafted. It really is dibs. It's getting dibs on guys in some sort of organized way so that one team doesn't have all the talent. It makes a lot of sense. But in all of this, there's the truth that, roughly half the guys who get drafted in the NHL will never see 1 minute of ice in an NHL game. It's trying to do their best looking forward, but it has gone down. It's gone down to the other businesses, gone down to juniors. It's gone down to trying to figure out who's going to go where, down to age 15 now. And 15 is one of the toughest parts, right? You see your buddies get a deal. What's happening with me? Am I good enough? You start talking to advisors. Am I going to be all right? But it happens in youth hockey as well. Am I going to play for this team next year? Am I going to play for this year? Somebody got to get Shattuck. And it's really, really hard to make peace with that and think there isn't something wrong with you. So we're going to talk today about what to do in this situation. But what I want to mention is this psychological principle that's so interesting. Now, remember, in psychology, people don't know everything. But research is highly suggestive of things. And if you see enough research, it's super suggestive that something's true. And it appears there's something really true in human nature, and that's that we compare ourselves all the time. I think it's a primal survival thing. I think if we're all back to being cavemen, we're all out there in the frozen tundra in Michigan in the middle of winter, and you got to grab a deer skin to survive. If you're not doing well compared to somebody else, if you're not providing for the tribe, you're in trouble. But let's go beyond Chris Palmer's thoughts. In terms of the world, there's research that says people are the happiest when they feel like they are doing at least as good or better than the people they surround themselves with or the people they compare themselves with. So it's built into us. Like, we really, really are happier when we feel like we're at least there or slightly above. So it's tough. We've got that stuff going in. It's really hard to move past that. So let me use an example for you. You had a horrific time, 2 ACL injuries, just brutal, protracted injuries, sitting on a couch while all your friends are going. You've had this great career, and you're wondering whether it's over. Tell me what went through your mind and kind of how you got past the comparison game.
Yeah, you're speaking of time in my life. I just graduated college at Michigan State, had signed my minor league contract, which I thought I deserved a little bit more than that after the success I had. But about 2 weeks left in my college career, I tore my ACL. Finished my playing days on that. I think I played 3 games on my torn ACL. Rehabbed all summer, got myself as good a shape as I possibly could be in to attend an NHL training camp. At that time, I think I was going to leave in like 2 or 3 days. I got invited to New Jersey Devils training camp, and I was skating down in Detroit with one of my idols growing up. I was skating with Chris Osgood. So it was a cool experience. He was still playing for the Red Wings, and slid into the post and tore my other ACL. I self-diagnosed it because I knew what it felt like. Had the same feeling 7 months prior. And I looked at Osgood and I said, I just tore my ACL. And he was like, how do you know that? I said, I just did it. Trust me. So I drove right up to MSU. I got checked out and eventually confirmed it. But to answer your question, at that time, my 2 best buddies growing up were excellent college hockey players. Both were captains of their programs at one point or another. Those two in particular and a handful of my other closest buddies were all on their way up to that NHL level. They'd all received NHL contracts, signing bonuses, and then here's me, 2 ACLs, sitting on the couch, not even getting a paycheck from my minor league deal, and kind of watching them pursue their dreams or our childhood dreams.
I've known you as a guy who never ever shows any real pissed off, any real frustrated. You just sort of figure it out. I've seen you in a bunch of different ways, and you're kind of always that guy. I joke you're like a unicorn, and you really are in that way, but I found something out about you today when we talked before the show that I think is fascinating, and that you said that you have kind of, I believe the words were, kept yourself naive to reality. It's pretty interesting. This idea that somehow in all this crap, a guy who just had a national championship, a guy who's looking at playing pro at a really high level, a guy who has guys around him who've had similar success, who are on the way, and you're stuck on a couch with the worst injuries that happened to somebody. How did you get past that? Did you really just say, oh, it's going to be fine? Or did you really just focus on the next thing? What's the answer that we can give listeners that helps them know how you got past what's got to be a horror show? Because if this thing doesn't get fixed, it's done. You're screwed. What did you do to get past that? Oh my God, I'm screwed for months here.
I think as a goaltender, I developed the skill, because we talked about how much failure can occur, and especially as a goalie, the goals are going in. I had to develop this skill internally to just be, even if I knew it was a bad goal, I played naive to the fact that it was a bad goal and I didn't let my emotions get the best of me so I could reset quickly. So I think as my gameplay advanced through the years, that became just an inherent habit of mine that helped me get over that moment of failure. So in this instance, injuries are uncontrollable, so it wasn't like a failure, but I took that same habitual routine of kind of just play naive, like, hey, I'm still this 5'5.5" asthmatic that is the shortest professional signed goalie probably in North America. I didn't even register that in my mind. Now I'm coming off 2 ACLs where now my stock went from maybe here to below Earth's surface. Didn't register in my mind. The only thing I could do was control what I could do, and that was listen to the medical professionals. And if they told me to do some little knee bends and up and down and get on a block, that's what I did. And of course I just had to follow and do what I could control. And of course I never had a spiteful mentality toward those having success. I think that was also a piece of it. So I stayed level-headed in that. That's not going to put the energy in the right spot.
You did acknowledge the fact that this sucks. You're on a couch. This is not good. But very, very quickly, and you started this early in your life, you just went to, okay, what's the solution? What can I control? What can I do? And it's such a great thing. So I think lesson one here in the comparison game is do what you can control. And it's hard. It's really hard because we're emotional and we feel things. And you're a little bit of a unicorn in that you process really quickly, but you've also had a lot of successes and you've kind of trained this thought process for a long time. Most people have a much harder time. Most people, especially when you're younger, we all know that while your brain's still developing till age 25, your perception of risk and danger is so different until this fully developed. So the younger you are too, just the lack of life experience, it's so painful when you're 12 or 13. I've had kids in sessions in full tears. Full tears because they feel like they suck. I suck, I'm awful, I'm terrible, I'm no good, I'm letting my coach down, I'm letting my team down. It's an awful feeling. But I can use even an example of a really, really high-performing person. Natalie Ferentz, our producer, awesome. She's an amazing goalie. She'd never tell you that, but she is. And for her, she's been on national teams. She played in college, just amazing. But she has had this process happen before. She's been on teams where she got no play at all, nothing. And it's like, what's going on? I'm busting my ass. I'm doing good. I know scientifically, measurably, I'm good here. Why isn't it working? And she could have been pissed and bitter, but she would get frustrated. She'd give herself a limited amount of time to be mad, maybe even a half hour. And then from there, she'd move on. Okay, what can I do now? Back to controllables. What can I do now? This sucks. I don't like it. What can I do now? And then she went from this national team where she wasn't really getting stuff to going to Caesars, having an amazing, amazing season. She just used it as fuel, used it as a way to jump forward. All this bad, all this comparison is so hard. And it's natural for who we are, but doing what you can control and using it as fuel seems like two lessons. So you work with guys at all different levels. Tell me a story about anybody who you saw just stuck in the comparison game and they were just paralyzed and couldn't get out of it, or stuck in the comparison game and found a way to bounce out of it.
It's similar to how we opened up in our conversation. The youth game, and especially our market, Michigan-based, where tryouts are kind of a thing of the past in general. It's a youth landscape at the Tier 1 level at least. A lot of times the teams are built earlier than when the tryouts are supposed to take place. And actually, USA Hockey mandated a new rule that nationally you can do that. But this level, I had a really good student who displayed an awesome mentality to only control what he could control. About this time, end of January, early February, he was notified by his coach that he wasn't going to be welcome back with the position next year as a goaltender. This team had two really strong goaltenders. They both played. They both rotated games back and forth. And when I looked at it, I said, we don't need a goalie change, but the coach made a decision. They kept rotating all the way through the end of the year. And this goalie knew the only thing he could do was when he got a chance to play his absolute best. It was his time to shine. It was his opportunity to play. He got the start, go and take advantage of that opportunity. And he made it all the way. They made it down to the state finals. It was his turn to play. He actually got the state finals start. He was the winning goalie of the state finals at his age level. The ultimate goal that you set at the start of the year, he accomplished it, yet he was cut. Does that make any sense? No, it doesn't. But he didn't get all wrapped up in the negative aspect of it. He just did what he could. And the coincidental piece was the team he beat in the final. The next day, he's practicing for them as his new team. And lo and behold, he made his way back to the original team a couple years later. But it was an extreme anomaly in this youth athletic team to be like, okay, I'm getting cut, but yet I won the states as part of the starting goaltender. So he did an unbelievable job of just taking care of the task at hand when it was his number called.
This really brings up a good point, and that's that you're ready when you're ready. If you look at all this, sometimes you see a kid at 10 years old, it seems like he's going to be a god. Just amazing. And then maybe for whatever reason, either he doesn't grow or he doesn't develop or loses his love for the sport, gets injured, and it doesn't work out. And you have other people, you wonder, gosh, like this kid's never going to figure it out. And then they move on. I think you're ready when you're ready. And it goes back to this Brisebois thing we talked about before. Julian Brisebois saying the only thing that matters is development and visibility. Development and visibility. And it's so true because if you're in the middle of nowhere, nobody's going to find you. But if you're in any kind of metro that has hockey around and you're good enough, people are going to find you. But development's the only thing you can do. Back to this controllable thing. You can't control what a coach thinks about you. You can't control what a scout thinks about you. You can't control the draft. You can't control what your teammates do. But man, you can control your effort every single day. You can control being a problem solver. You can control being a guy who's dialed in. And I really think that's the message, but it's so hard. And I just want to acknowledge the fact that for most people, they don't know what to do with this suffering part. They don't know what to do with this bad feeling they have when they see some other guy wearing a pair of pads for his team for next year. Like this has happened. Guys have worn pads from a team they have a commitment to for the next year, and it screws up the locker room. I mean, you're at state trying to focus on winning state, and you've got guys going to 4 different teams, and it's cancer. But in the end, if you could bring everybody back to this one thing, and it doesn't matter where you're going next year, it does, but it doesn't for right now. What matters right now is every single time on the ice is an opportunity. Every single time is an opportunity for you to show scouts, to show people, to show coaches who you are. And if you're not taking advantage of every one of those things, even the team that just gave you a commitment, if they see you half-assing out there the rest of the season, they can take that commitment back. These things they're air. These aren't legal contracts. So in the end, it makes the most sense for everybody to do everything you can. Back to this word, dialed and driven, every single thing you have. And like Natalie talked about before, our producer, when it was hard for her, she decided that she was just going to fight harder. She can't control that crap, but she's going to fight harder. And that's such a big thing. So to me, controllable, effort, development, visibility, these are like the foundations of every great thing.
You gave me a flashback from my best buddy growing up, Eric Condra. Awesome story. He was the kid at 13 years old into 14U. He was kind of the last pick of the team. And the coach at the time was kind of feeling heat from all the parents and people kind of judging the roster. The coach saw he was a smart player, had some long-term development opportunities, meaning he could kind of get his way around the ice. He wasn't the strongest player or the quickest player, but he was one of the smartest. And so at 14, he was kind of the last man in. By 34 years old, he was the longest tenured NHL player. So all those studs at 14U and 15U, many of those players never reached the level he did. So he had an awesome story where he was that slow developer, still at an elite level, of course. Like he was on a top team at the Tier 1 level. My cousin Brian Lerg also played in the NHL. We both played in the USHL equivalent. My cousin Brian was at NTDP. I was in Omaha in USHL. Eric made it to the North American League, kind of the step down from that top tier junior level. We all made our way into college. Eric to Notre Dame, which at the time they were dead last in the league before he got there. They hired a new coach. coach, Jeff Jackson. He had gotten there as a freshman. He led the team in points as a freshman. During that course of time, that's kind of what put Notre Dame hockey back on the map. New coach and a new class, and he led the team. And then that long-term path just kind of kept showing up, returning, doing his thing, controlling what he could, excelled academically, excelled athletically. He's the definition of being dialed. Everything he did, he wanted to do to the fullest. That's why he was best friend, because it was fun for us to be around each other and push each other. But he didn't get that opportunity to start. He had to work his way through the American Hockey League. So he had to go through this grind of being successful at every step, whether it was youth to Tier 2 juniors to Tier 1 juniors to NCAA Division 1, then sign a contract, play in the minors, work his way up through the minors, get called up, get back down, get called up, sent back down, and eventually he found himself as a full-time NHLer.
That's awesome. I mean, when you think about that, it would be so easy for him to quit anywhere along that line. I mean, so many times things not working, comparisons to others had to be hard. I mean, has anybody told you that they've compared themselves to others and they're just stuck? Have you seen that with any of the guys you work with?
Well, the social media, of course, makes that so much more prevalent, where any teenager can see a friend or counterpart or even kind of enemy on another team get a commitment or get drafted or get tendered. So, of course, I mean, it happens daily. That's all we see is someone having success displayed on social media. And, of course, during the time training our youth athletes, we have to give them the clarity and display with them the long-term development path and how things can always change. And it's a fluid path for everyone. No path is the same. And whether it's boys, girls, goaltenders, forwards, everyone has this different path. And you're going to have these different roadblocks sent your way, and you're going to have their friends and others have different path as well. So again, it goes right back to what can I do now to not spend my energy on what they have going? What can I do now to spend the energy on what I have going? You know, it came back to all the little things we've talked about, setting those goals and working hard and finding a way to be the dominant player on the ice or in your field of play.
I want to mention two quick things. I mentioned a lot kind of jokingly, but also serious, that gas stations understand humans. They really do. If you go into a gas station, there's no health food in there, right? It's all garbage. But it's garbage that kind of feels good. Sugary, salty, crunchy. Sometimes, like in Florida, beer. Some places, vape, whatever it is. Stuff that just makes you feel better for a moment. They understand that the majority of people in the world, the overwhelming majority of people in the world, are suffering. And there's a lot of things they just don't get past. And whether it's taking care of your family, going to a job, traffic, whatever it is, I understand why people kind of get stuck in that. If it's hard and you focus on that, then that grows. It becomes your life. But there's a subset of people who somehow get past that. They make a decision that this sucks, but I'm going to move forward. And again, you're off in the extreme. The majority of people, though, get stuck in this, what I would call slow burn of distracting irritation at what isn't the way it should be, this comparison thing. And there is something that comes up, and I hear this all the time. That coach isn't being fair. That coach doesn't like me. That coach picked his son over me. Somebody paid somebody. Somebody did this. It's unfair. It shouldn't be like this. And I understand all those feelings. But if you don't find a way to make peace with that, just follow that through, okay? Yeah, well, maybe there was something bad. Maybe it was a buddy deal. Maybe you should have gotten something better. If you don't follow that through to some kind of resolution, then you're spinning. And spinning sucks, and it gets you nowhere. I just know the only thing that's ever worked with guys I work with is to puke out how you feel. I mean, talk for an hour if you want about it. Get it out. And Natalie talks about it. She might be pissed off for a half hour at the most, and then she's on to the next thing. Everything is in the resolution of these things we think, these distracting things that keep us from our game. The quicker we can pull those distractions away, the better we have a chance of getting what we want. So you can be pissed and you can be frustrated, but staying in that, it's a career ender. Because there's so many guys, girls coming down into this tiny funnel of college. You're never going to get there unless it's everything you have. And if you become, like you said before, a problem solver. And that means facing reality, making peace with it. What can I do now? 2 ACLs stuck on a couch. Am I going to cry my eyes out, or am I going to get my ass up and do something? That's the solution.
The only mindset is really to be overwhelmingly awesome. If you put yourself in position to potentially be cut or potentially be not welcome back, then you're more than likely labeled in that bottom third of caliber of player on the team. Of course, there's always other elements, but if you're overwhelmingly awesome and you're just showing up dialed and driven every time you come to practice and games and you're executing at a high level, you know, coaches really aren't that smart. Sorry, coaches, but they're just going to play the people who give them success. So when I've sat on the bench as a goalie and wondered why I didn't play 2 or 3 games in a row, my only solution was, well, I got to find a way to be awesome and win. Help my team win, you're going to play more. And that's really the truth. You can't sit there and sulk about it. It's not going to do anyone any good. We've talked about how you're going to be judged on your body language potentially and your attitude. You can always control your attitude and effort. And so that's the starting point of where you're going to build from. So you control those two things. The rest will start to organically take care of itself if you control those at your highest level. If you're supportive, if you show up, work hard. And again, if you're intentional in your training and if you're intentional in performing when it's your time to play.
You bring up this great point, and that's this thought habit thing. Because thought habits are real. And if you are super negative in your life, you probably have a super negative thought habit. You can turn that around. And just like you, from an early age, you were working on this thing and trying to work through, and things don't work, you get back up, you go for something, you get some success. But if you keep doing that, if you keep going through this process of, okay, this kind of sucks. What can I learn from this? What can I do now? What can I control? You do it and you get a success. Boom, all these things are working together. And all of a sudden you have actually a process that builds confidence and builds confidence and builds confidence. And you become less breakable and maybe even relatively unbreakable, which is the goal. Because this is really hard. I mean, even guys at the NHL, it doesn't matter if it's a guy in Europe, like I said, making $30,000 a year playing pro ball, he's shoveling crap off the rooftops to make a living. It doesn't matter whether it's that or the highest levels of the NHL or an 8-year-old kid in a house league in Florida. All of it's hard. None of it's easy. All of it has a lot of joy to it, but you got to find some way to get through that muck. And if you realize that all of it's work, and if you find a way to keep busting ass and fighting back against the comparison game, you have a chance of actually having a life and building up thought habits that make you so strong that you're like, hey, okay, this always happens this time of year. What am I going to do now? I'm going to fight harder. I'm going to go so hard that people can't believe they picked that guy instead of me. Make it a game. You used to compare yourself to the other goalie at the other end all the time. You do your research on him. So I just think there's a lot that's possible. And you don't have to do this. Let me go back to this. You don't have to do any of this. There's easier paths, honestly. But if you want this, this is the path. So I think, in kind of a summary here, to get past the comparison game, especially in the crazy season where this guy's going here and this guy's going there, you got to find some way, talk this crap out if you need to talk it out, put it in perspective, control what you can control, do all the good things one thing at a time, feel the rewards of your efforts, realize that all of life has the chance to be unfair because we're human beings and we screw stuff up, and move on, move on, move on, and fight for what you want. Development, 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 visibility, visibility, visibility.
And for me, I use the comparison as a youth athlete more as motivation. Like, that helped me gain this giant chip on my shoulder. The goaltenders I grew up playing against all had really strong and long NHL careers. Ben Bishop and Corey Schneider and Jonathan Quick. He's going to finish as one of the all-time wins leaders as an American in the NHL. I grew up playing against those goalies year after year after year, from youth into the junior level into the college level. Unfortunately, not the pro level for me. They went and made millions, and I was battling through the minors. But I used their success for my personal motivation. I would envision myself training against them in the off season, and I knew that internally in my mind, I was just as good or better than them. So I kind of used their success that they had, that comparable, for my internal motivation, and it drove me. So I controlled what I could. For me, that was the recipe for success, is they helped drive me to higher levels of play. And for that reason, I was able to reach a success as an athlete. With everything that we've discussed today, we want to continue to remind everyone, stay dialed and stay driven on accomplishing your goals. There's always going to be adversity. Hockey's always going to be unpredictable, so stay with it.
Awesome.
Jeff Lerg! One of the best saves you will ever see, keeps this game alive.
Here's Palmer again, the Hockey Mentality Podcast, Dialed and Driven.